Hi, my name is Sean Busby, and I'm a professional snowboarder living with type 1 diabetes. I'm coming to you live from my home up in the Alaskan Arctic. I live in a remote mountain range called the Brooks Range, and I live 63 miles north of the Arctic Circle. These are my sled dogs. They move me around out here, so my diabetes story was I was diagnosed when I was 19 years old. I was actually misdiagnosed. At the time, I was competing professionally with snowboarding. I was living in Colorado when I was going through the misdiagnosis. And at first, I didn't know what was going on. I just had these crazy symptoms I just had a bunch of nausea and vomiting, and I was really thirsty. But I had a bunch of teammates that were returning back from various competitions all over Europe and around the world. And some of them were coming back with some bad bugs and some viruses. So I just figured I caught like a bad flu from them. And that was why I had the symptoms. That's what I assumed. So it wasn't until I was at the U.S. National Championships in Breckenridge, Colorado, where things got really bad. After my competition, I came back to the condominium where I was staying with my teammates, and I just got violently ill. I called my parents, who at the time were living in California, and I asked them, I was like, Mom, Dad, I am really sick. I've never felt this sick before in my life. What do I do? How do I see a doctor? And so they explained to me what an urgent care was and what the emergency room and all that stuff. And they knew I had to be leaving the next day for a competition up in Canada for the Canadian National Championship. So they figured, well, maybe it's a 24-hour bug. Why don't you see how you're feeling and then get back to us, in the morning. And so I did that, and I woke up. I felt amazing. I felt a lot better. So I decided to go up to Canada and finish out my season. So fast forward a little bit, and I had no issues. And so I returned back to Colorado, and I'm in the spring training, and then the symptoms kind of hit again. I would go after every single training. I would go to the local grocery store, and I would load up with liquids, and I would come home, and my roommates would be like, Sean, you're always going to the grocery store. You're never coming home with any food. Why are you always coming home with liquids? And I just figured, hey, it's warm out. I'm training really hard. So that must, I'm just really thirsty, guys. And so I would pound these gallon-sized jugs of like grape juice or fruit juice or sports drink, and think nothing of it until about 2 hours later, I was extremely ill. So I started going to the emergency room, and I actually went to the emergency room 7 times within 9 days. Each time being turned away, saying I had a bad bug, here's some anti-nausea medicine. If symptoms return, come back in and we'll take care of it. Just come see us again. It wasn't until that 7th visit where a doctor came in, took one look at me, and instantly admitted me into the hospital. There I was in the hospital for 12 days. I lost over 30 pounds of body weight, and I felt horrible. During that time, I developed a severe case of pneumonia, and that's when I also discovered the importance of health insurance. Luckily, my parents had convinced me to stay under, take a full load of college courses online. And so I was doing that. So I was able to be underneath their health insurance. However, I had a really high deductible plan, and I was out of network. So once the hospital stabilized me in those 12 days, I was sent out to California for further testing. Sorry, I'm trying, my arm's getting tired here. And I was sent out to California for further testing, and there I was put through a test called the glucose tolerance test. Now, if you suspect someone of having type 1 diabetes, the last thing you want to put them through is the glucose tolerance test. And I was told I'd be given the results within 24 hours. 24 hours came, and the nurse called and said, Mr. Busby, your lab results came back in. Everything appears to be fine. Well, that was interesting because I was just in the hospital for 12 days, really sick. I've lost a ton of body weight. And so we have a family friend who's a cardiologist, and he said, no, something is indeed wrong. Get a copy of those labs, send it to me. I'll forward them to some colleagues. So that's what we did. And when we showed up and I got the lab work, I noticed abnormal, 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 flag, 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 high, high, high. And so we flagged down the nurse. She went back up to the doctor. The doctor came out and he apologized. He said, "Mr. Busby, I'm not sure why you're told everything was fine, but indeed there is an issue. Let's go into my office and we'll talk about it." So my mother, my father, and I went into his office. He sat us down and he said, "Mr. Busby, don't worry. I've dealt with plenty of people that have type 2 diabetes. Here's what we need to do." So what I didn't know at the time was I was being misdiagnosed. I was 19 years old. I'm a professional athlete, and I was being misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Frankly, we think because of my age and just the doctor being misinformed. And so I was told these pills I had to take and how to check my blood sugar. To me, I had never been sick, so I just figured, okay, well, I've seen shows like House and ER on TV, and so it makes sense to me that, you know, this doctor knows what he's talking about. I just take this and I'll feel a lot better. So I went home, tried to do that, and I felt horrible. I continued to vomit, continued to lose my weight. I couldn't hold any food down. So they increased the dosage of the pills they gave me, and then they put me on an all-protein diet, and I just felt horrible. So that progressed to the point where I started to think that maybe this is all in my head. I grew up in a soccer family, and we talked about the power of visualization. My father coached college soccer, and so, you know, that's just, athletics was always a thing, and always the power of the mind. You know, you can overpower anything. So I figured, okay, well, maybe if I get out of my parents' house, get back to my own independent life, get back into training, get back with my coaches and trainers in Colorado, this medicine would start working. So as I was getting on an airplane at John Wayne Airport in Santa Ana, California, to fly back to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, I nearly passed out, and I was rushed off the plane, and I was taken to a teaching hospital at UCI Irvine in California. And there I was given the correct diagnosis of type 1 diabetes on my mom's birthday, 3 months later after the misdiagnosis. And that first shot of insulin was the most incredible feeling that I've ever felt in my life. I instantly knew I had the correct diagnosis just based on how I was feeling. And so the doctors, they educated me on insulin and dosing and all this stuff. I went home and I did my own research. And during that time when I was doing my research, I came across the JDRF. And the JDRF at the time had an event going on that they run every 2 years called Children's Congress. And Children's Congress is where they select kids from every state in the US to go to Capitol Hill and speak to members of Congress in Washington on why we need to find a cure for type 1 diabetes. So I was able to go on this homepage of the JDRF and read all of these stories of these kids that were the delegates that were going and speaking to members of Congress. And, oh, I guess we're turning away here. Bear with me. The dogs want to go. Whoa. So, probably don't want to shoot you guys in the sun there. So I was able to read all these stories, and I remember just pressing refresh on the homepage and reading countless stories. And there's a few stories that really stood out to me. One was a parent talking about what it's like to have a 2-year-old that has type 1 diabetes and how their child can't really explain when they're feeling low or high. Then there was another story of a 9-year-old talking about when he spends the night at his friend's house, why his parents have to come over to his friend's house in the middle of the night and check his blood sugar. And then there was a story of a 16-year-old going on his first date and having to explain to his date why he had to give himself a shot of insulin before he ate. And here I was 19 years old. I was traveling the world for snowboarding, and I never had to worry about any of that. I only had to worry about an occasional pimple or if some girl in class liked me. And it grounded me. It showed me that, wow, if a 2-year-old could do this, a 9-year-old could do this, a 16-year-old could do it, then surely so could I. And so I was inspired, and it showed me that I could still be a professional athlete. I would have to learn about my body and what that means. And so I wanted to find a way that I could give back since I was so inspired. And so I started a nonprofit organization called Riding On Insulin. And we host action sports camps, skiing, snowboarding, surfing, mountain biking, skateboarding, all across the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and have had camps in Australia as well. And we just finished out our 11th season with Riding On Insulin, and serving about 500 kids a year, and it's just a fantastic way to be inspired, and it really motivates me, and it continues to do that because I see these young kids and they have known life no different, and I've known what life was like prior to diabetes, and life isn't much different. The one thing that I've come to realize is that you have to be more responsible, but responsibility isn't such a bad thing. It's made me a better athlete for that as well. And the other thing I realized is that the next best medicine to insulin is community. And I find these events that, TCOYD runs and other organizations, any event that gets people together and you get to be around other people going through the exact same thing that you are, is extremely motivating. I face burnout all the time where I get sick of dealing with this illness, and it helps me. It remotivates me. It gives me a fresh outlook to, keep charging on, to keep going on. So now my snowboarding career is focused on the backcountry. I do mostly expeditions, and what I mean by backcountry is instead of riding a chairlift, I use my own 2 feet. So I climb mountains. Sometimes we use a helicopter, it drops us off, and then snowboard down. And I focus on remote areas. Now my focus is on the Arctic. I live in the Arctic, so it's a good place to focus on. But I've been doing Arctic expeditions for a number of years now. In 2014, I became the first person with type 1 diabetes to backcountry snowboard on all 7 continents. And I also live with another autoimmune disease called lupus. And so to me, I enjoy the challenge. I think that's just part of being an athlete. And I enjoy what I find in the mountains. It's kind of like a healing space for me. And it's just another form that really motivates me to take care of myself. Now, I've been saying I live in the Arctic. So what does that mean? So my wife and I, we run a retreat center called Arctic Hive. And it's in the Brooks Range. We live about 7 hours away from the nearest town, grocery store, hospital, pharmacy, you name it. 275 miles to our south is where that is. That's Fairbanks. So we're 275 miles north into the Arctic wilderness. We have Gates of the Arctic National Park right here, and Arctic National Wildlife Refuge up to my northeast. And so one way that we access our place is we can either fly in or with a bush plane, or we can drive on the haul road, also known as kind of like ice road, if you've seen ice road truckers. And so like I said, that's a 7-hour drive. It's pretty treacherous, so we have to time it right. And we live off grid. So we make our own power, and at the retreat center, we offer yoga retreats, backcountry skiing. We bring people in, and we see some incredible northern lights. We live directly under the Aurora Oval. Hold on one second. Glacier, leave it. Leave it. Lay down. Lay down. Sorry, hold on. So yeah, we live directly under the Aurora Oval. So pretty much every... Hold on. Hey, leave it. She's getting a little grumpy here. This is Glacier. Stay. So from August 21st through April 21st, we can see the northern lights pretty much almost nightly. And then after April 21st, that's when the dark season ends and we're approaching 24 hours of daylight. So then we don't see any stars from April 21st through August 21st. So pretty wild in the core of winter from November 30th to January 10th. We don't see any sunlight as well. So we basically do a lot of skiing out here, a lot of time by the fire, firewood gathering. We live right outside of a subsistence village called Wiseman. It's a population of about 12 people. So they all hunt their food, caribou, bear, grizzly, moose, you name it. And then we run our sled dogs all the time. And then in the spring here, as we get all this daylight and it starts warming up, we'll start going and backcountry skiing and snowboarding all these peaks that are around us, and we'll use the dogs to really get out there and explore. And that's kind of our life. We love it. It is hard work. and but we get to live in a beautiful spot, and that's really great for us. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this summit, and thanks for having me and allowing me to tell my story. Cheers. All right, let's go. On up. G, G, go for G. Good girls, good girls. Woo-hoo-hoo. Cold foot, ha, ha, ha. Good, good girls. So I figured I'd show you guys the dog yard and introduce you to some of our sled dogs. Right now we have 6, and we plan on getting a few more. And that way we can utilize them to pull us into the national park, get us deeper into the mountains, and go snowboarding and skiing with them. So they are our ways into the backcountry, but they're all pretty tired. We did a big supply run today back to the village. And so they've been hauling for the better part of the day. But here we have Powder. Hey, Powder. Good girl. This is Glacier. Good girl, Glacier. You can stay. Here we have Coldfoot. Hey, good girl. Oh, hey. And then in here is Inslee. Hi, Inslee. Good girl. And then this guy is Milo. He's our only male. Good boy. Good boy. And then this is our newest. This is Tundra. Hey, good girl. Good girl. And so that's our team. And they all get to come on inside on really, really cold days. And then other than that, you know, it's all about them developing their winter fur and getting it nice and thick for this lifestyle. And they eat chicken lard and all sorts of fat and just keep really high calorie diets along with some really high end food for them. And but yeah, it's been exciting growing our dog team, and excited to get a few more dogs and be able to get deeper into the mountains with them. And they also, every night we pick a few that get to come inside and get that personal one-on-one time too. So tonight it'll probably be Tundra here since she's our youngest. And so she's a lucky girl for tonight. So one thing with managing diabetes in an environment that's remote like this is I really just have to be on top of my game. I can't risk having severe lows or severe highs that could put me in DKA in such a remote spot. Again, being 275 miles away from the nearest town, hospital, person that could help me, I just have to be spot on. So one thing that's really helped me is technology. I use a CGM and an insulin pump. And with the help of a CGM, I'm able to get alerts on what my blood sugars are doing when I'm outdoors in this environment, when I'm working, anything I'm doing. I can get those alerts that can notify me if I'm going high or low. And that has given me such freedom in my life. It also is great because if Molly is traveling and I have our satellite booster running off of our solar system so I can have service and make phone calls, she can get updates of what my blood sugars are doing. And that is huge. And she can notify someone in the village to like go and check on me or whatever. And so technology has really given me an advantage in living the life that I want to live. I know I would still be doing this without that technology, but it has sure made it a lot easier. I highly recommend, if anyone's looking at technology, is to, ask questions about what it is and research and reach out to your medical team. And there's technologies that work for various people, and there's technologies that don't work for various people. So it's all about finding what works best for you. Another thing that I have on me is a satellite beacon for emergencies, so I can hit an SOS button. But again, being so far away, by the time they locate me if something was to go bad and get to me, it's going to be hours before they can get like a helicopter up. And so again, just the freedom of what my CGM can give me has been huge. And as well as an insulin pump, I don't have to worry about stacking insulin. That I used to have to worry about that when I was on injections. And so that gives me a lot of freedom. It allows me to make a lot of adaptations. I know when it's really cold here. Last week it was -50, and that's not the coldest it gets here. I mean, it gets down to -60s, -70s, no problem. And an area of Prospect Creek to our south, about 20 to 30 miles to our south, reached like -81 or -82. They hold like the record. So it gets really cold here, but that tends to drop my blood sugars because my body is constantly trying to stay warm. My metabolism is working overtime. And I need to be able to make changes to my insulin that will be fast and will take immediate impacts to me, which I can do with a pump. And so that's super important to reduce basals and that sort of stuff in this kind of an environment for me. The other thing is it's diabetes. So, you could do everything right one day and then the next day you do everything again and you just have a really tough time. So I have to really listen to my body and see if I'm getting tired or if my body just needs to recover. If I need a day of rest, need to be inside for a couple days, then that's what I will have to do. And in the summer, it's the opposite. We have 24 hours of daylight, so we're just working as much. Our summers are so short that we're just working as fast as we can before we lose our summer. By middle to early late August, like around, I know like August like 20th around here is peak fall colors. And that's also when the bugs all die off. In the summertime, the mosquitoes are prehistoric levels. You have to wear a net all over your body. It's absolutely, summers kind of suck, but we're constantly working. We're outside working, trying to get as much done that we can before winter hits. And so again, just that technology has been made a huge advantage to me. I can make sure I'm getting carved up. I can make sure I'm getting the right amounts of insulin that can keep me safe and can keep me working. So great thing about TCOYD and their summits and their conferences, especially when they're in person in a non-COVID year, is just being able to go and talk to all the different companies and see what the latest is that's out there, the latest and greatest, what's coming out, what's on the horizon. And so again, just doing your research, finding what's going to work best for you is what I encourage the most. A common question that my wife and I often get asked is, how can you live so far remotely, and what does that entail? So for us, that means that we have to plan way far in advance. So we plan for about 6 to 8 weeks. So when we go to town about every 6 to 8 weeks, and we resupply. And resupply means making sure that all my insulin is filled, that I have all my diabetes supplies ready to get picked up. And it also means securing all of our food and those kind of supplies for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. Luckily, with diabetes, we all know how to plan ahead because we're constantly doing this with this illness. And with COVID, that's definitely made it more difficult, because on a good day with the way to get to town, on a good day, it takes us 7 hours. And we end up bringing like containers and containers that we fill with fuel and gas, so we can run our snow machine and different things like our generator and stuff. So we have to load up on fuel. We usually arrive, by the time we arrive in town, it's about an hour before Costco closes, and town meaning that's Fairbanks. And so when we get to town, we get shopping carts, and we just stockpile shopping carts filled with groceries and fresh produce and that sort of stuff. And then we reel out these shopping carts, and we load up a trailer, we load up our truck, and we have the dogs all in their dog box, which is on top of the truck, and we just stock up. And that's kind of it's kind of typical for Alaska. A lot of people live in remote locations, and so you actually see people at Costco when they do their town runs, and they're doing the exact same thing. For people that live in bush communities where the only access is via a bush plane, they have a bunch of containers and they're in the parking lot filling the containers and then taping them. And then, they get all weighed and then they put them in the bush plane and then they fly home. So it's definitely a unique way of living out here. It's kind of standard, I guess I would say. But again, it's just all about preparation, and diabetes has really, truly trained me on preparation. And so that's how we prepare with supplies and go into town.